With the first 2 posts and handrail installed, I had to fix the mistake I made in the previous episode where I'd cut the middle post too short and so didn't leave enough length to do the capping. The solution was to make a separate piece to then glue on top, and I cut it from the same oak beam using the Jackery, which I'm enjoying immensely. So I'm hoping from that I can make the cap. First I gotta get it square. For those who don't know, the shorter a piece of timber is, the harder it is to get square. Length helps you hold the line whilst going through the machine, kind of like a longboard on choppy waves. So it's more or less square, but I need to get down to 180. So we're going to keep these cracks because you'll never get rid of it, and just shave off that and that. (180 by 180). Thanks for the multiple tips about sticking offcuts back on. It does seem pretty obvious now. With the cap finished, I put it aside and we moved on to installing the final posts and handrails. First, however, I had to cut back the top landing floorboards which had been left long. Thankfully, I avoided hitting these nails as we'd literally just got this blade sharpened. Then, to make sure the floorboards wouldn't buckle up, I routed a half lap across the ends which the landing tread would eventually bear down upon. And then it was on to installing the top post and second handrail. My dad had made these up whilst I'd been in the UK, and because it was such a tight corner for the post to slide into, he'd had to make the mortise and tenon joints a touch looser than normal. This isn't an issue as we would be draw boring the pegs, gluing everything and putting in some heavy duty stainless screws. I'd also put screws into the bottom of the bottom post to give it some extra grip against the stringer, and we'll fill these holes with some oak plugs. Then we installed the two landing treads using no nails glue and a huge amount of clamping pressure. Then I screwed the base rail onto the top flight stringer, ready to house the spindles which we still needed to make up. We managed to get a couple of screws in places that would eventually be covered, and the butt joint you can just about see between these two boards will be hidden by the base rail for the spindles. There were a couple of options for how to do the top handrail. The first was fixing it to a concrete pad within the wall, similar to how we installed the beam for the half landing, and you can actually see the hole in the wall from where the original handrail went in, which also shows just how much higher the new floor is. The second option was to cut another newel post and then fix this to the wall. This will be repointed to look like it's full-sized and submerged in the wall. This did, however, mean that the posts weren't in the same plane. One was forward of the landing and the other was back from it. The solution was to have a 90-degree return on the handrail. We needed a very precise 45-degree mitre cut for this, and I was reminded of the importance of knowing which side to cut from to avoid breakout. We chose not to draw bore these mortise and tenons, instead using a combination of props and clamps, which gave us a bit more control, a lot more power, and didn't put any unnecessary pressure on the tenons, which we'd had to make shorter than we would have liked. Once that was done, it was onto the spindles. In total, we needed about 50, 20 for each flight, and then 10 for the top landing. Again, my dad had been working on these whilst I was in the UK, and all that was left to do was cut them to length at the governing angle of the staircase, which was 33 degrees, and to put a chamfer on each edge. The chamfer started about 80mm from the top handrail and 40mm from the base rail. This was so that the handrail wouldn't obscure the detail if you're above looking down. At this stage in the build, it seemed like there were loads of little jobs that needed completing, such as cutting these spacers to go between the spindles. So at this point we were on track, but barely. I had a flight back to the UK 2 days later and didn't really fancy manually nailing over 100 spacers. So I treated myself to an early Christmas present, which helped speed things up a lot quicker. The skirting you can see around the base of the middle post was one of those little jobs I was talking about and had already been made up by my dad off camera. So this rail system is beautifully simple but makes for incredibly strong spindles, which further stiffened up the entire structure of the staircase. A couple of treads had actually started creaking, but once the spindles were in, it completely disappeared. One of the reasons for this was that the handrail had a slight bow, which we'd put facing down. So as I knocked the spindles into position, it straightened the handrail and put different parts of the staircase under tension, compression, or shear, the essential forces in any good timber structure. Then it was on to the top, and I want to take this moment to thank Jackery for sponsoring this video and supporting this channel. It's so nice to work with brands who make products that I can genuinely use, and the size, weight and capacity of the 2000 Pro is perfect for what I do on a daily basis. I think it's extremely well built, and I'm fortunate enough to have used some pretty well built machines recently. Apart from the obvious convenience of power anywhere, I'm very much enjoying life without extension cords everywhere. So if you think you have a use for a portable power station, or you want to start harvesting some delicious solar energy, I highly recommend giving Jackery a look in. They're also about to launch 2 new products next week at the CES show in America, which hopefully I'll be testing out shortly on this channel, so stay tuned for that. If you look closely here at the spindles, you can see what I meant by the chamfer starting further down on the top, then up from the bottom. The final thing to do was drill and peg the tenons. Clearly the glue had held the joints together, so the pegs would simply be an extra reason for it not to pull apart. And we couldn't have pegs on all the other joints and not these. You may remember when we demolished the original staircase, we found a thimble in the wall. I'm convinced it was some sort of good luck charm, so it felt fitting to put it back into the new staircase. And what better place than the middle post? I'm hoping that in 300 years, after a million yanks on the cap, the glue may weaken and the cap comes off, revealing the thimble and its unread message. I'm assuming if you've got this far on the video, you've been through the entire series, so you've seen how many steps there's been on this journey. Add that to all the steps you've not seen and it helps to explain why I still think this is the Everest of carpentry. Just as complex as a roof, but far more technical. I've learnt a lot and all I can really say is I miss working with green oak. PS, I've been working on a secret project during the last year, and if you want to know more about it before everyone else, click on the link down below to find out.